Hey, and thanks for taking the time to watch this week's Oldtown short, Humble Gifts. There's a story in the Bible about people entering the temple in Jerusalem. As the story goes, Jesus watched as they put their gifts into the treasury or shared their offerings. He saw people from all walks of life putting in different amounts of money when finally a poor widow appeared. She reached into her pocket and pulled out 2 small copper coins. Jesus watched as she dropped them into the offering. Then he said, "Truly I tell you, this poor widow has given more than anyone else. For others have given from their abundance, while she has given all that she has." Friends, I know that many of you are probably thinking, oh no, this is the Sunday when they talk about money, when they tell us that we haven't given enough. I hear people say all the time that the problem with churches today is that all they want is our money. Well, let me assure you, my friends, it's just the opposite for me. Because it's far more important to me that you come to church or watch our Oldtown shorts online than putting money in the plate. I always laugh inside when I hear people say that they wish that churches today would be more like they used to be, giving to the community and serving people instead of always asking for money. And I laugh because the church is not a building or a corporation. The church is the people. Actually, on this All Saints Sunday, we're not focusing on money. We're focusing on members and friends of our Oldtown family that have passed away in the last 2 years and the humble gifts that they shared with us. 2 weeks ago, Reverend Marty Singley, who served our church back in the 1970s and 80s, came to worship with us. And he made the comment that there's no other place quite like Oldtown. And I agree with him. Because we're not a church with big endowments and multiple staff. We don't have fancy candelabras and shiny communion ware. And if we're going to be really honest, we struggle every year just to make our budget. But we don't worry about that. Because the more important thing is that we have people that love and care for our church and for our community and for one another with all of their hearts. We often say in Oldtown that our balconies are filled with Oldtown saints who have gone before. Those who sang in the choir and worked on church suppers and fairs. Those who served on committees and built floats for town parades. Those who served communion and coffee and visited elderly shut-ins. Those who plowed the parking lot and shoveled the front step. Those who planted flowers and folded bulletins and made casseroles for potluck suppers. And those who were teachers and carpenters, accountants, and grandparents. They are all saints who shared the humble gifts that they had, gifts of time, talent, and treasure to make the Oldtown Church what it is today. Friends, each one of our pews were once sat in by people that were filled with the same feelings that you probably have today. Whether you have feelings of joy or fear, frustration or anger, grief or a sense of inner peace and calm. But no matter what they felt, they continued to stand firm in their faith, sharing what they had and doing their best to look forward with hope while trusting that God would guide them as God continues to guide us today. Friends, a lot has changed over the years in the world, in our church, and in our church family. And a lot has changed in the way that people understand the idea of church. But the way that we worship and live out our faith has changed too, and that's okay. Since the pandemic began back in March of 2020, many of us have lost friends and loved ones. And here in Oldtown, we lost 6 individuals that had close connection to the worship and work of our church. Because our church building was closed from March 19th, 2020 to August 15th, 2021, we were unable to gather together to remember and to give thanks for who they were and the humble gifts they so generously shared with our church family. So today, on this All Saints Sunday, we're going to take a moment to remember them and to give thanks. Now, they were not all members of the church, but their membership status doesn't matter. Each of them shared humble gifts with our church family in their own way. And since reopening our doors, their empty pews have left spaces of sorrow in many of our hearts. And their presence, their personalities, and their kindness has been missed. On April 23rd, 2020, Dorothy Sutherland passed away. Dot was a longtime member of the Oldtown Church, and she raised her children here. She served as a trustee for years, and later on the auditing committee, helping us to take care of our church finances. Dot always worked on the knitted goods table at our fair. After all, she loved to knit and crochet. She made prayer shawls for those in need, knitted goods for our church fair, and afghans and blankets, not only for family and friends, but also for newlyweds and new babies. Dot loved the Red Sox, and she always talked about their games during coffee hour. She also told stories about running battles that she had with chipmunks out in her yard. She loved to do puzzles at Coffee Connection, and she loved her sweets, even though she was a diabetic and she wasn't supposed to have them. Dot would come in on Thursdays to help me at the church office, and she took her work very seriously. She did not like when others tried to step in and take her job, even if they were just trying to help. She was the one to fold the bulletins. She was the one to change the numbers on the hymn boards, and she was the one to set the tables for our church suppers, because there was a certain way to do each of those jobs, and it had to be done right. After putting the hymn numbers on the hymn board, she would also go to her pew and mark the pages of her Bible and hymnal, and her pewmate's Bible and hymnal. She and her pewmate were very good friends, and they always checked in on each other, especially if one of them didn't make it to church. Now, her pewmate could be a little ornery sometimes, but I can say that because Dot's pewmate was my dad. On the next day, April 24th, 2020, Richard Teeter passed away. Dick used to come to worship with his girlfriend and sit in the back corner. Now, he did not have an easy life. Dick grew up in an orphanage in Pennsylvania until he was 17, and in the past 10 years, we buried his wife and 2 of his daughters. But Dick always had a smile on his face and a hug to share. And boy, did he love church music. He would light up at the announcement of every hymn, and he brought joy to all. On September 19th, 2020, June Clavette passed away. June was a long-time part of our Oldtown family, and like Dot, she raised her children in Oldtown. Over the years, with her husband Ed, June worked on yard sales, church suppers, coffee houses, and pet clinics, let alone taking care of the grounds, playing the chimes, and singing in our Oldtown choir. During coffee hour, June would tell us stories about growing up on a farm and her favorite donkey. She'd always keep the tradition going of making Dottie Green's cinnamon twists. And though June sometimes appeared cranky, deep down inside, she had a heart of gold. And she loved other people, even when they drove her crazy. On January 11th, 2021, David Kingman passed away. Dave was another longtime member who raised his children in Oldtown. To say that the church was important to Dave is an understatement. The Oldtown church was his life. He was the moderator for many years, and as a local contractor, he was part of many of the construction projects in Oldtown, from additions and maintenance of the old parsonage to the church addition in 1990, and from the sanctuary ceiling project and steeple renovation to roofing and renovation projects in and around the church and schoolhouse. Dave also built birdhouses and furniture for our church fairs, and with his wife Ellen, he used to bake all of the baked beans for our ham and bean suppers back in the day. Though he was a big guy and could be ornery at times, he would always sit in his pew with his pewmate Dot with a big smile on his face, encouraging the children and making sure that everyone knew that no matter who they were welcome in Oldtown. On February 27th, 2021, Peter Sandsaver Jr. passed away. Peter spent his life in and around the Oldtown church, where he was raised as a child. He was married in Oldtown in 1948, and for a time raised his 7 children there. Peter was a teacher at heart and loved to enlighten others with his learnings. He served for many years as a Sunday school teacher in Oldtown, as well as serving on the finance committee. Peter was always at our Oldtown fairs, and every year he'd put in a special order for a gallon of Elsie's salad dressing. And finally, on April 17th, 2021, James Hall passed away. Jim was raised here in Oldtown, sharing his gift of music with the church from a very young age. Though we didn't see him every week, generations of families grew to treasure the tradition of Jim sitting up in the balcony during the candlelight Christmas Eve service and playing his guitar, singing, "Oh, Holy Night." Friends, what humble gifts these 6 individuals shared with us over the years. And what an inspiration to future generations to use the gifts you've got to make a difference in your community and in the world. Though many of us are still grieving over the loss of loved ones, one of the best things that we can do to hold on to our memories of them and to truly live lives of faith is to be the things that we loved the most about the people who are gone. Sharing with the world the humble gifts that they so generously shared with us.